Coming up next, we meet Trailblazer Award recipient Indra Nooyi.
Indra Nooyi is a true pioneer. The former chairwoman and CEO of Pepsico, she was a transformational leader. She reoriented the company around a philosophy of performance with purpose that's become more standard today, but that's partly a credit to her. It was both rare and bold at the time she did it. Indra became CEO at a time when less than 3% of CEOs of Fortune 500 companies were women. In 2019, she also was appointed to Amazon's board of directors. Her memoir, My Life in Full, Work, Family, and Our Future, will be released soon. I've read it. I can tell you that it is unlike any CEO memoir I've ever read. It captures her very unique journey of breaking boundaries as a woman and a person of color in the upper echelons of the corporate world, and her continued commitment to gender equity and diversity, and her deep concern for the challenges of balancing commitment to career with commitment to family. Indra, thank you so much for everything you have done, and thank you for being with me today.
Alan, thank you for having me. It's a privilege to be interviewed by you. I've known you for many, many years, and I must say you're clearly among the very, very best of publishing people that I've ever met. So it's a privilege to be interviewed by you.
Well, thank you for that, but the privilege is all mine. Can you talk about, without giving away the book, one or two key moments that you think were critical in helping you make it to the top of Pepsi?
So before I get to that, let me first say that I am absolutely delighted to get this award from the Women's Business Collaborative. I think, I've been gone for 2 years from the corporate world, but the fact that I'm still being recognized for these changes we made while I was CEO actually makes you feel warm inside, that these memories and these actions that you took still have a long tail. So thank you very much to the WBC for the award. I tell you, I think back at my career at PepsiCo because I've had to do that in writing the book. And I tell you, the most important thing is I came to PepsiCo in 1994 when the company needed transformation. And it was just beginning to think about how to change the company's portfolio, what businesses to stay in, what businesses to get out of. And I think that I leaned into the transformation as the head of corporate strategy. Rather than shirk away and say it's too much work, I threw myself into the transformation and did way more than my job demanded of me. I got into the detail. I was willing to roll up my sleeves and do whatever work it took to position the company for long-term success. And the fact that somebody who's come from the outside was willing to really throw themselves into the future of the company, I think caught the attention of all the senior leaders in PepsiCo. And they said to themselves, hey, here's somebody that we want to watch, we want to mentor, we want to develop, because she's going to give to PepsiCo way more than PepsiCo is going to give to her. And so I think that was the beginning of a great career at PepsiCo, the fact that I leaned in and the fact that mentors leaned into me.
I've heard you give that advice to others as well. Take tough assignments, be willing to take on the hard ones. It's good advice. You were the rare woman in the upper echelons of management, and even rarer as a person of color. How did that affect the way you did the job?
I'd say mixed, because on the one hand, it was a positive. When I walked into a room, I was different. I was a woman. I was a person of color. I was tall, for a woman I'm talking about. So I think the combination of the three made people sit up and take notice of me just as I walked in. I think the second is I was fearless. Now, thinking back, I wonder why I was that way. But I used to do my homework, and I walked into a meeting completely prepared. So I walked in to project the fact that I'd done my homework. I knew what I was talking about, and I wanted to contribute to the discussion at hand. So people sat back and took notice of me and said, forget the fact she's a woman and a person of color. She also knows her stuff. So maybe this person is somebody to be reckoned with. So that combination helped. On the other hand, I will tell you that very often I was the only woman in the boardroom, only woman in meetings. I might have been 20, 30, 40 men and me. So deep down inside, I've actually got butterflies in my stomach. Do I fit in? Do I belong? Are people looking at me differently? But I always fell back on my core knowledge because I realized I wasn't there because I was a woman. I wasn't there because I was a person of color. I was there to make the company better. And as long as I focused on that singular goal, that's all that mattered. And that's all I did through my entire career at PepsiCo.
Yeah. You established the philosophy of performance with purpose. What led you to that? I mean, today we hear a lot of companies talking about the importance of purpose, but it was not that common in the days that you did it. What were you thinking? What drove you in that direction?
You know, Alan, I've been spending a lot of time thinking about the whole notion of performance with purpose, and purpose in particular, and ESG goals, and all the pros and cons around that over the past few months. And I'm almost puzzled why it was something frame breaking when I did it, because I'm looking at companies and I say to myself, companies are rooted in communities, companies are rooted in society. You cannot do anything that harms society or harms communities because you're given a license to operate in every society. And if companies don't do well by societies, who's going to do well by societies? So all that performance with purpose was doing was saying, hey, the world is changing. People are leading sedentary lifestyles. We have to change our product portfolio to make it healthier so that people don't look at us and say you contributed to some obesity factor going down, going forward. So I realized we had to change our portfolio to keep growing. We operated in countries where there was no water. We cannot keep using a lot of water to make fun for you products when communities don't have water. To me, it's a very simple message because I grew up in a city where there was no water. And everywhere I went around the world, I saw plastic waste. And I said to myself, why do we contribute to a plastic waste, which is going to stay in the ground for the rest of our lifetimes? So to me, performance with purpose wasn't a frame-breaking program. It was a sensible way for companies to make sure that you operated with responsibility in every community and society that you were part of, so that you got a license to operate from them.
But Indra, it sounds so commonsensical when you put it that way. It just sounds like the right thing to do. But I was there at the time watching as a journalist. I mean, you got a lot of pushback. There were people who said, hey, hey, lady, stick to selling the sugar water and the salty snacks, please. And don't talk about making people healthy because that's not how you make money.
And it takes that courage to paint that picture and talk about what it's going to take to change the company.
And persevere in the interim, because of course you were right. You were right. In the end, you did get performance by changing the portfolio, but it took a while.
You need to have perseverance, courage to persist, but you also need the board with you. As long as you have the board of directors supporting you, you can make those changes.
Indra, I said, I've read your book. I don't want to give it away since it's not out yet, but I will say what makes it distinct. I've read literally hundreds of CEO memoirs. What makes it distinct from every other CEO memoir is that it has a purpose. It's not just your story. You really wrestle with the issue of having a career and having a family at the same time. And I can't think of any other CEO memoir that does that. Why did you make that decision? Why was that so important to you?
Because that's who I am. I mean, I've been married for more than 40 years. I have 2 daughters. They make me whole. If you want to talk about me as a person, without them, I'm just another business executive. To me, my life in full is my life as a whole. And we can talk more after the book comes out, Alan, but I got to tell you, I think I'm bringing to the fore issues that people want to talk about, but don't think it's appropriate to talk about because it doesn't show the alpha side of you. To me, I don't care about alpha, beta, gamma. I don't care about any of those Greek alphabets. At the end of the day, we all are people rooted in families and societies and communities. And it's high time we brought all those aspects of us to the front burner, as opposed to pretending those things don't matter to your persona.
At the time you became CEO of PepsiCo, as I mentioned earlier, less than 3% of CEOs of Fortune 500 companies were women. But even today, we're still only talking about 7 or 8%. Why are so few women rising to the CEO job, in your view, having been there?
I've talked about this many times, and let me repeat it. If you look at the pyramid, at the entry level, there are a lot of women who come into management jobs, and they have the top grades in schools. They are just achievers, high achievers. They are phenomenal. And then you look at the top, there aren't that many women, because in between, that pipeline is just broken. If women want to have families, if they want to, somehow balance having a family and the job, is just not possible. There are too many barriers in their way, and they don't have enough support systems. And so I think we have to start to address these issues, because it's no longer a female issue. It's a family issue. It's a community issue. It's a country issue. Because if we don't take the best and brightest of our entire population, which includes women, and allow them to contribute to the economy, we're going to have a huge talent gap, Alan. So to me, everything that I think about is an economic argument, not necessarily a female argument. It's a family argument. It's an economic argument. And I think that's the lens you ought to think through all of these issues.
Yeah, and sadly, that problem seems to have been exacerbated by the pandemic.
Unfortunately, and yes, and people are not recognizing the depth of the issue post-pandemic, especially on women, because they became the school teacher, the cook, the cleaner, the childcare worker, everything rolled into one. And the stress of the family was just overwhelming. So I think that it's high time we thought about every bright brain in the economy should be given a chance to contribute to the economy. That's what our country needs to keep growing. We have a talent shortage today. That's what our country needs to keep growing. If we don't do that, we're going to have to fill the gap with massive immigration.
And so if you had to give advice to a young woman, and I know you have to all the time, people come to you and ask you for advice, to someone who says, yeah, I want to have a career like yours. I want to make it to the top of one of the great companies of the world. What advice do you give them?
Well, first of all, I wouldn't start by saying I want to get to the top, because the minute you start to do that, you start to fixate on having to move to the top as opposed to working your way through a company. I mean, you don't inherit CEO jobs unless your family's got a company. You work your tail off to get to a CEO job. So I would tell people that it takes a lot of hard work. And along with wanting to move up a ladder, if you want to also have a family and kids and things like that, you better build a fantastic support system around you. And I think that's one of the biggest issues we all need to come to terms with, Alan. Communities, how do we all come together to help each other? How do we become each other's support system and restore trust in communities? It's going to be a big issue that we all need to talk about, because no young person can move ahead without a big support system if they want to have a family. That's the key thing. Kids are a full-time job. Being employed is a full-time job. If you want to get to a CEO, my God, there are 3 full-time jobs rolled into one. So think hard before you do all this.
Yeah, you now sit on the board of Amazon, so you're on the other side of the table in that relationship. What can board members do to help get us to where we need to be on this issue?
Well, I think boards have a responsibility to make sure that the company does not discriminate against any group of people, any type, race, gender, ethnicity, orientation, I don't care. The company should be focused on hiring the best and brightest. And once you hire the best and the brightest, don't just focus on hiring. Are you doing everything to give them an environment where they can be successful? Are you working to develop them? Are you giving everybody a chance to thrive? And along with that, are you making sure that they can also support their families while they're working in the company? Whether it's job flexibility, whether it's having learning opportunities so you can develop in the company, are you providing those opportunities? Too often we tell people you should have families where everything is your problem. It's not. I mean, look, you can't park yourself at the door, Alan. You can't park yourself at the door of the company and walk in. All of the issues of the family are on you as you work. The best is to allow people to blend all of that so that you can get the best out of every employee. I think it's going to take us moving from just head and hands to putting some heart into the jobs if we want to bring in the best and retain them.
That's a great point to leave on. Indra, congratulations on this award. Thank you again for all you have done and all you continue to do in driving the world towards gender parity and gender diversity.
Thank you, Alan. And again, thank you to WBC for this wonderful award. Appreciate it.